Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about how Chinese medicine is the OG somatic therapy. Somatic therapy has been popping up more on the internet. There are a lot of different types of somatic therapy, a lot more people talking about nervous system regulation. And so I thought it would be really helpful to do an episode talking about how Chinese medicine itself is a somatic therapy and how this often gets overlooked in the modern acupuncture landscape. So let's get into what somatic therapy is just to begin with. This is the connection between the mind and the body. And while a lot of people are starting to acknowledge, yes, there is a connection, we don't always know what to do with it. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more people focusing on somatic therapy and discussing their specific type of working with the body to unwind the mind, or unwinding the mind in order to unwind problems in the body. But everyone, to some extent, has experienced something that is stressful and then they get a symptom in their body. Maybe a stressful situation exacerbates back pain that you've had since you were in college, or maybe your stomach is very sensitive if you get scared, or if you're tired, right? Like, people see this in their day-to-day life in a practical way, but sometimes they don't really understand why and how they're connected. And so, just to clarify, like, somatic therapy is a therapy that is focused on the connection between your mind and your body. And so I want to talk about specifically why Chinese medicine is the OG somatic therapy, because there is no separation between mind and body in true Chinese medicine, in classical Chinese medicine. Now, just to give you another reminder and overview in case you're new here, classical Chinese medicine is what was practiced prior to Mao taking over China. What we got after Mao took over China is what all of us learn in acupuncture schools across the world, and that's called traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM. Truly, the world just knows Chinese medicine as TCM, but TCM was created in the 50s. It's not ancient, and it's not true Chinese medicine. It's a very small portion, and it doesn't rely upon the channels like classical medicine does. It cherry picks points to treat certain symptoms. And for a lot of patients, they get wonderful results. There are many, many, many people that get great results from TCM acupuncture, and especially when paired with TCM herbal medicine, because TCM herbal medicine is the system that provided a framework for acupuncture itself. And TCM herbal medicine is not as far away from what was before the ancient stuff as TCM acupuncture is. So it still maintains a really solid function. And so when people are TCM acupuncturists and they use herbs, they are able to get really good results with their patients. But increasingly, there is a lot of TCM acupuncture without herbs. And I think this is a concern on a lot of different levels. And I don't want to go too far off the rails here, because I do want to stay focused on how Chinese medicine is the OG somatic therapy. But what I'm getting at here is TCM is a very watered down version that does not pay respect to the whole system of Chinese medicine, because it has simply eliminated all of the channels except for points from the primary channel. So what I want to get into is how this works and how it is somatic therapy, and how it's baked in. It's totally intertwined. As always, I'm speaking classical Chinese medicine here, so I know sometimes these concepts are really foreign, but I think if you just kind of roll with it, and if you hear words that you're like, I'm not sure what that means, or what is she talking about here, I think I'll close the gap for you eventually. So if you can just bear with me, I want you to understand why this is intertwined. And also, I want you to understand why it's so important to find a classical Chinese medicine practitioner who truly uses all the channels, because so much has been left out in modern acupuncture, what we call TCM. So in classical medicine, we have 4 groups of channels. They're called the sinew, the low, the divergent, and the 8 extraordinary. And each of those has a different role, but they're all functioning to protect us, to keep us alive and well. So anytime our bodies perceive a threat, these channels are going to whisk away that threat and store them for us. And this is why I'm always talking about mediumship, because those channels need medium to store something. And specifically, since today we're talking about mind and body, I want to talk about the emotion that these channels are storing away. So we don't have to get into the specifics of these different channels, but you've probably seen me bleeding people or bleeding myself on social media. And we'll just take this one as an example because these are the low channels. Now, y'all, this is spelled L-U-O, but pronounced low, like the opposite of high. And these channels store emotion in the blood using the blood. So when you hear us acupuncturists talk about being blood deficient, building your blood, supporting your blood. This is why we're talking about supporting your blood, because it is a tool, it's a resource that is used to store emotions that are too big for you at the time. Maybe you just got the worst news of your life, but you have to go right back into an important meeting at work. So you don't have time to cry or scream or process your feelings about it, whatever it may be, because you've just got to pull it together and go back into this thing. That's going to go directly into the low channels. Hopefully you're going to have enough blood to store it there. Because if you don't have enough blood to store it there, say there's no room at the inn, there's not enough blood, all the low channels are full, it's got to go somewhere else. And it can go a couple of different ways, but if it needs to go somewhere else, it's going to go deeper into the body. This is what I mean when I say that Chinese medicine is the OG somatic therapy, because the way that we experience the world, and when we don't have good enough skills to experience emotions and move through it in an effective way, it has to get stored in the body. Otherwise, it would just kill us. So it gets stored in these channels. And if we're not using these exact channels, it's very difficult to pull it out. So if we're going to an acupuncturist who is only using traditional Chinese medicine, this means that they're only using the primary channels. The primary channels are not the sinew, the low, the divergent, or the eight extraordinary. So that might have sounded like a lot of jargon there. So let's just back up. What I'm saying is, in total, there are 5 different channel systems, but modern acupuncture is only using one. And so the one that they are using is the one that should be just keeping us going every day. We wake up, we take a deep breath, we open our eyes, we go to the bathroom, we eat food, we digest our food, we move about our day, right? It's just the 24/7 functioning is handled by this one group of channels called the primaries. And that's what we learn in school. That's what is now points are cherry picked from those channels to make up TCM, but it leaves all of the other 4 channels out. And so that is where I get concerned. And that's where I'm trying to, or what I would like to talk about today and really highlight for you, that when you use the other 4 channels, you're able to really get the somatic therapy that you're seeking. Because I think a lot of people, when they are looking for acupuncture, they have usually exhausted other methods of treatment. They've been to the conventional medicine route. Usually what I would say is I see people in acupuncture when they have tried literally everything else, because acupuncture, it tends to be the least familiar. And so it is the last stop, more or less, because it's the last thing they haven't tried. So I think at this point, a lot of people are commonly realizing that there is something like under the hood that needs addressing. So I think intrinsically and intuitively, patients are realizing that there is this connection between their mind and body, and that's why their longstanding digestive problems aren't resolving, even though they've seen the best GI doctors in the country, and they've done the cleanses, and they've done the supplements. It's not getting better because there is a mind-body connection. So when they seek out acupuncture for this, really for anything, but in this example, longstanding GI problems, they really need to be aware of what channels that acupuncturist is using or is not using. Otherwise, we can't really get to the somatic therapy part. Now, modern acupuncture does still acknowledge that the primary channels do connect with the organs, and each organ does have an emotion. But what I'm trying to say and explain here is that when an emotion comes in that is too big, the primary channels can't handle that. And so they send it off to somebody who can. And that's all those other 4 channels that I mentioned earlier. I don't want to get too into the jargon. I just want you to understand that what we learn in school, what all of us acupuncturists learn in school, are just one small tiny piece of the whole puzzle. And the rest of the puzzle is where somatic therapy lies. because if it didn't, we wouldn't be alive. This is Chinese medicine physiology, how the disease, how the pathology progresses. And pathology means emotion that is overwhelming, emotion that we don't have the skills to deal with. And so how that progresses is that it does move to these other channels. And so it's hanging out over here so that we don't die, so that we keep living. Now, we might have this terrible digestive problem that we've had for many, many years, and that's not great, but it's still serving the purpose of keeping us alive. So if we want to unwind that pathology, we have to address where it actually is. And that means rolling it back from the channels where it has been stored. And often what has happened, and you've heard me talk about this on social quite a bit, I'm sure, is that because that pathology, that emotion has been stored in the body in these other 4 channels, maybe more than one of those 4 is affected at this point, it creates a deficiency. It creates like a lack of resources because our body has been so busy storing it away, trying to protect us. So if we want to truly use Chinese medicine as a somatic therapy, we need to be using classical Chinese medicine, the channels of classical Chinese medicine, so that we can actually address the problem where it is. Otherwise, it's just like kind of rearranging the furniture in the house without cleaning out the junk. I hope that makes sense. If you are familiar with the Marie Kondo method, she talks about going through your entire home, not one room at a time, but literally your entire home, and figuring out what is it that you have in your home that you don't love, you don't use, or that is not functional. If something is broken or otherwise like it's not working. So any of those things that fall in those categories, we get rid of it before we even start organizing. And then what we're left with is things that we do love, things that we do use on a regular basis, and things that are not broken. They're in good working order. And I think about the practice of classical Chinese medicine in a very similar way, in that if we continue just reorganizing the junk, we can go to the container store and get really cute storage bins. But if we haven't cleaned out the junk, we're just rearranging the junk. And so this is why a lot of times people say, when I go to acupuncture, I just feel so nice when I'm there. The people are so lovely, because we are acupuncturists are really lovely people. I feel so comfortable. I feel so relaxed. But then when I leave, that doesn't stay. And also the problem that I went in for isn't really solved. This is because we're not getting to the true root. We need to figure out where that problem is stored in the body, which is somewhere in those other 4 channels. And the reason that we feel so good while we're in treatment, even if it's modern acupuncture treatment, is because it is moving things. And a lot of times we just get stagnant. You just feel kind of like a little bit grr. And when you get an acupuncture treatment, things are going to move. The acupuncture treatment itself is going to move our energy. It's going to move our blood. And that does make us feel better at the moment. But what I'm really interested in is having people feel good indefinitely. And yes, this takes generally more than one treatment. So yes, it is building on itself. But if we're saying that from a perspective, when we're using like a primary channel, we can't actually get to where the emotion is stored. So I don't think that it's legitimate to say that those treatments are building on each other. I think we have to go to where it is. And in that way, classical Chinese medicine really is the OG of somatic therapy, because it doesn't separate physical symptoms from emotional symptoms. I notice a lot when people have had some sort of mental health problem, they hesitate to share that publicly as if it's some sort of like overly personal thing to share. But they generally don't have a problem sharing about their personal physical health problem. And from my perspective, when I'm listening and observing that, I don't see the difference in the two. Like, I think the two are very intertwined, and Chinese medicine sees the two as very intertwined. The classical text begins with all diseases are rooted in the spirit. And this tells us that our minds and our bodies are not separate. And so when you work with a classical acupuncturist who uses all of the classical channels, then you can really be assured that you're receiving somatic therapy, and you're able to address both the physical and the mental health components that make up the problem. As always, I share a lot of information on these podcast episodes. I hope that you'll stick with me if you're at all interested in learning classical Chinese medicine. If you're a patient who's looking for a classical practitioner who wants to know more about it, or you're someone who maybe went to acupuncture and didn't get the results you were looking for, that's what this podcast is for. I want you to understand the differences between the ways that acupuncture is practiced so that the next time you're looking for an acupuncturist, you can ask different questions and look for more of what you need. And specifically in this episode, I wanted to highlight how Chinese medicine is an incredible somatic therapy. And even though we don't use the same words of necessarily regulating nervous systems, we are absolutely doing that through treatments. And we can see that in patient outcomes. And if you have questions, if you have comments, please connect with me over at Instagram. Happy to connect. I love building the community. And thank you so much for listening.